A new mall opens in Bengaluru, and immediately what you expect happens. There's a lot of traffic jam, and everybody around it complains. It's on Twitter, 2 kilometer long traffic jams, and people complaining about the chaos on the roads, interruption to regular travel, office goers being stopped because of all these chaos. This is the usual. It's not a special case. Every mall that has opened in Bengaluru have had this problem. In fact, this is happening across the country in major cities. I've seen it around my area. With first, it happened at the Mantri Mall in like some many years ago, right? And then people got tired of it. It moved to Orion Mall, which came up in Rajajinagar. Then people got tired of that and moved to Lulu Mall, which had this problem. And then the IKEA store on the western side of town. Once the commotion in a mall dies down, a new one is opened and the crowd moves there and causes a problem. This doesn't mean that the problem has gone away from the malls that exist. Even now, if you go in front of the mall, it's a total chaos. It may not be what it was in the beginning, but it has shifted to a new one. People got tired of the old one and began spreading their weekends at the others. What happened because of this mall? Why is it reoccurring again and again? We need answers to these questions. How do we get answers to these questions? Because everybody is making assumption. There isn't enough parking. The police was 10,000 parking and there's only 3,000 or something. I want to get to the bottom of this today. There are lots of things. I speak to an expert as well to get you to understand where we are going with this. There are some things that you will be shocked to hear, and you will hear it today as to why this is happening again and again. So after this Mall of Asia on the road to the new international airport, it's not new anymore, on the way to the international airport, opened in late October. It caused a massive traffic jam, and the police reacted to this, right? They imposed section 144 of IPC and shut down the operations of the mall for 15 days from end of December, closer to the new year, to the mid of Jan, to prevent the chaos from spreading further, because they had already heard a lot of complaints and traffic jams and all those things. This mall gains more publicity because it's on the way to the international airport. It's on the service road, very visible. Of course, the mall went on appeal to the court. They didn't want to be prevented from operating, because why would you do that? What were you doing all this time is what they asked. So the Karnataka High Court, on this appeal by the mall, stated that the prohibitory order imposed by the Bengaluru City Police Commissioner can neither be treated as an order completely prohibiting or preventing the use of the mall for its business purposes, nor as completely prohibiting and preventing the public from having access to it. So I don't know what the prohibition really is, because they just said, no, you can't do anything about it. The court ordered that the police should not take any precipitative action against the mall until the matter is resolved amicably or until further orders are passed by the court. Basically, what they've said is, you caused it, live with it now. Why didn't you fix it earlier? So let's do some analysis now. What the complaints are is that there are a lot of traffic going in and coming out, but there isn't enough parking. So let's address the parking issue right up front. What does the Ministry of Urban Development, it was called MOUD when they passed this, but it's now called Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. They had issued guidelines quite a while ago. I'll put it up. For parking in shopping malls, which recommended a minimum of 3 car parking spaces per 100 square meters of built-up area. So that's the guideline from the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Housing and Urban Affairs. The BBMP has their own parking bylaws. The bylaw 16 on parking requirements. It states 1 car park for every 50 square kilometers. The BBMP says 2 per 100 square meters, while the national guideline says 3 per 100 square meters of floor area for retail buildings. Of course, the BBMP bylaws have a separate one for multiplexes and something a little different for food and beverage outlets, because a mall has all of these things. Right? It's not just retail, it also has food and beverage on the food courts, and then the multiplexes. The multiplexes bylaws goes by the number of seats that there are. So for every 25 or 50 seats, you need to provide X number of car park. Remember, it says car park and not two-wheeler parking. That's what the guideline says. So the two-wheeler is left unsaid. And second, it does not classify a mall in its truest sense because of this mixed use. You're supposed to do whatever calculation it is and tell them what it is. Now, Mall of Asia. How big is this mall? On its public website and other sources, we found out that it's about 13 acres, but not all of it is built up. But they say it has 12 lakh 40,000 square feet of gross leasable area, or that's around 116,000 square meters. This translates to 3,456 car spaces as per the MOHUA guidelines, right? The old MOUD guidelines, and 2,320 as per BBMP, right? This is the guidelines. MOHUA guideline was 3 minimum and the BBMP guidelines is 2 minimum. And the BBMP bylaws was last updated in 2003. Now, again, these are called parking minimums. This is the minimum parking you need to have. So the occupancy certificate was given for the mall, right? And the BBMP issued that. They call it temporary occupancy or whatever name they give it. They've given some kind of an occupancy certificate to the mall, and that claims that the total area is around 86,421 square meters, which is different from the 116,000 that the publicity material claims, right? Okay, let's take the BBMP because that's who is going to approve. If you take the BBMP calculation, it translates to 1,728 parking spaces, car parking spaces minimum as per BBMP bylaws, right? And if you apply the same area to the national guideline, the MOUD guidelines or the MOHUA guidelines, that will translate around 2,592 parking spaces. So let's assume that if BBMP were giving an approval, if you had 1,728 car parking spaces, you would get your approval, right? As per their bylaws. And if you wanted to follow a guideline that was set nationally, it would still be only 2,592 parking spaces minimum, right? So that is the difference at 1,728 and 2,592. Now, what is the actual parking space that they have right now? 2,324, which is more than the 1,728 that BBMP needs or mandates as the minimum. It doesn't say maximum. And you could even go up to 3,400 at the highest as the minimum, right? So clearly the mall has given what BBMP specifies is the minimum space that is required. Minimum car allocation, minimum parkings that is required to be provided was 1,728. We have complied. We have given 2,324. That's what it says. Nowhere does it talk about two-wheelers. So this space is four-wheeler and two-wheeler combined. So whatever mix they want, because the bylaws doesn't say anything about these things, right? Even the guidelines don't say anything about this. However, the police claim that the mall draws 10,000 vehicles and the mall needs to cater to this. When do they say this? The mall was scheduled to open in end October, and I think they did. And on the October 1st is when the traffic police questioned the traffic management plan and the parking. Now, you and I know that this mall was not built on October 1st. It took 2, 3, 4 years and there were approvals to be given and a lot of approvals to be gotten. So the Joint Police Commissioner of Traffic in Bengaluru quoted in a newspaper, "None of the malls or tech parks in Bengaluru obtains a no objection certificate from us," which is the Bangalore Traffic Police. "But we will soon be recommending to the state government, not BBMP, to mandate an NOC from the traffic police for malls and other establishments that attract large crowds. Currently, multiplexes, cinema halls, or events such as concerts require an NOC from the traffic police under the Entertainment Act." Here's where we are. The traffic police know certain things by having done a lot of work on the ground as to what this kind of a space usually gets, right? Footfall. But this is changing as we go along. The city grows, new attractions, new malls. How do you know that 10,000 doesn't go to 20,000? You don't know. There may be a sale someday that attracts 20,000 people or 15,000 people. What are you going to do then? But do they have the technical expertise to do a traffic management plan? Does BBMP do that? They don't. They look at setbacks. You read the bylaws, you will notice X many meters, this many meters. You satisfy the meters of whatever or the numbers that are written there. If you follow the process, you're done. You don't account for growth. You don't account for predictions. You don't account for the area in which you're living in. You don't account for other traffic. None of these things. There is no traffic impact assessment, right? And it is, even if you do a static traffic impact assessment now, it'll change over time. How much do the organizations that are managing this know? The road is built separately. This is being given approval separately. There is no coordination of how this needs to be done. The police are informed 1 month before that this is opening, and then they come and want an NOC. What will you do with the NOC? The parking lot is already built 4 years ago and approved. So let's talk to some experts. I wanted to hear from Professor Ashish Verma of the Indian Institute of Science Sustainable Transportation Lab. He has been doing traffic impact assessments for many people. He's done it for large, complex places. How do we look at crowd management? How do we look at traffic management. So I wanted to get your thoughts, Professor, on the root cause of this whole problem. Where how do we go about? It seems to be happening repeatedly, right?
Yeah.
Mall after mall after mall, it keeps coming up. Not just here, I'm sure across the country, these issues are cropping up. How do you
Any
see
large-scale development would have a substantial impact.
Hmm.
So I see this, not just specifically the parking issue, but the overall traffic impact assessment issue.
What is that? What is traffic impact assessment? Why have they not done it?
So any such new large-scale development, based on the extent of development being planned and the activities that would happen there, business, what kind of floor, how the floor space would be utilized. Is it commercial, business, different kind of commercial, mall, hotel, any of the other such kind of residential or it would generate certain amount of traffic. Generate in the sense it will generate traffic coming out from that land use and or attracted to that area, at that land. And there has to be an effective assessment of that. Okay, which we call it as trip generation. Basically, understanding the trip generation potential of that proposed land, development or land use. Okay. And there are scientific methods to do that. There are also, we have done studies, for example, on some such large commercial spaces in Bengaluru earlier. Yeah, I will not name them, but what you do is you basically use certain trip generation rates for different kinds or categories of land use. So you use those trip generation rates to basically estimate the number of trips that will be generated and will be attracted. Okay. And there are then ways to understand how much of it will be in during time blocks, during different time periods of the day. Okay. This is an essential step for us to understand the traffic impact. Based on this traffic impact, then you will understand at a given time how much of parking space is required. Okay. Or if you have certain specific policy or a scenario that you would improve, say, public transport connectivity, say by providing a direct access or walkway to the nearest metro station, if there is one, yeah, or you would run some kind of shuttle service with people being taken through. Then, based on those scenarios, you can then re-estimate the different category of vehicles which will get generated, both attracted as well as produced from this land use. Okay, that will then give you an idea of how much of parking space is actually required and essential in different scenarios. Okay, no public. You can also run scenarios of, say, at certain point of time, if it is, say, office space, if certain point of time, certain percentage of employees are working from home, or there is a staggering of work hours, how this will then translate. So what you need to understand is what would be the hourly traffic that this land use would generate, okay, and according at different times of the day, in and out, and how this would then translate into the requirement of parking space, the road space, etc., etc. Okay. Unfortunately, this assessment, traffic impact assessment, is not done at all. Is not done
Really?
at all.
It's not mandatory at all?
It is not mandatory at all. Whereas it is mandatory, for example, in countries like US or many European countries, where any proposed new development like this is basically asked to do. The authorities mandate the traffic impact assessment be done, and any improvements in the transport system in and around that area, in the influence area of that land use development, whatever augmentations or changes need to be done, they are actually borne by the developer. Developer are made to pay before they are approved to do that development. So it's a precondition, precursor, mandatory cursor process before even approving a specific kind of development in that area. Okay, this is a norm in US and many other developed economies, which is completely missing in India. We don't mandate it.
We don't mandate it. Now, is it true that some people do end up doing just for the heck of it? They do a traffic impact assessment just so they want to know and they don't want to have these kind of repercussions happening afterwards.
Some assessment they try to do. For example, in the case of Phoenix Mall of Asia, also I came across a traffic assessment report that L&T did in 2015. Actually, the Resident Welfare Association there have contacted me to help them understand the traffic impact, considering the grave situation this Phoenix Mall has created. And when I looked at that report, again, I don't want to name the consultant or anybody. I found that this whole traffic impact assessment of the proposed development is actually missing. What they have done in terms of projection is only the regular traffic growth rate that IISc or any other guidelines prescribe, like 7%, 10% increase in traffic, which is a natural growth rate, which again has to be realistically done for a given city. But other than that, the consultant completely missed out the traffic generation, the trip generation of mall and other properties in that area that they are trying to build. Okay. So they have not loaded at all that new generated traffic onto the network. They've just done a forecast of the traffic due to natural growth of number of vehicles and so on, and just finished the report. So it's a very shoddy work, and it doesn't then reflect the actual scenario that would arrive after that property gets opened, which is what we are seeing. The other point is they've only looked at the service road. But what you need is the complete road network around that land use, in a good influence zone, to see how the impact would be on each and every road link within that influence, not just on one service.
But does the TIA also say, based on the TIA, you have to have multiple exits, you may have to provide more parking or things like that?
You can actually get down. So as I said, you'll be able to estimate hourly traffic in and out, and how this would then be going in different directions. There are reasonable ways to estimate how the total trip generation, traffic generation from that land use would get translated into flow on each and every link.
So the dispersion and all of those things can also be planned based on this.
As I said, we have done and we have developed this methodology in past also for some large scale development in Bangalore. And we have successfully done, and we have showed how much of, say, traffic congestion would happen during certain periods of the day due to the full scale opening of that. That's the level of assessment is required for you to get to a real idea of the situation, and then let the developer pay for any improvements that you need to do before you even allow them to complete the development and open.
So that's the other thing, right? So October it is opening, and October 1st the police come and say you need an NOC from me. Well, the property is planned and built 3-4 years ahead of time. At such late stage, what kind of assessment and NOC can you even get when you haven't even planned the property development? And the shocking fact is TIA is not mandatory for large things, right? So don't you have, isn't this and the crowd management piece, right? Before I get to the crowd management, you've done a lot of work in that, including Kumbh Mela and other things. As to, this is not a transit. It's not like if the police say there needs to be 10,000 vehicles, it's not like 10,000 every day all the time, right? There are peaks and surges. You put a Christmas tree, there'll be 20,000 maybe. But before we get to that, this based on what you saw with the consultant report, do you think it has, do you think what they have provisioned now is correct as per that TIA that was done?
No.
Not even
because
that.
As I said, they have completely missed out the assessment of traffic generation due to the development of these land use. They have only done a simple forecasting of the traffic on service roads based on general growth rate, which not at all reflect the new traffic generation that would happen because of those landmarks.
So how does it look like for a solution like this, right? So you're looking at this is like a cricket match happening, a lot of people coming in. This is a mall with a lot of people who come in and go out. This is basically crowd management. You've done a lot of that. What do you think that plus traffic impact assessment? That is not being done. An NOC from police is not, I think, the way to go, right? I mean, shouldn't we have something better? What is that system that is in place?
On what basis? They also unfortunately lack technical and scientific capacity within their organization to do this impact assessment, and based on which they can give the NOC. Yeah. So they will also give NOC based on some experience and thumb rule and so on, which for such large scale development could be highly erroneous. Okay. So you need to have this scientific method established, and this being made as a compulsory process, as a precursor before you approve the development. On the issue of crowd management, again, based on the traffic impact assessment, you can translate this into assessing the number of people that would come to the mall and would come to that specific land use development, say in a given time, and for different times of the. So how, based on the different times of the day, you are estimating the traffic generation at a number of trips attracted and going, you can actually create an assessment of net number of people who will be there in that space. Okay. Now, knowing the floor area at each level, okay, and having, there are clear guidelines, for example, from a risk perspective or a stampede perspective, how much of density you should maintain and should not allow that to cross. And so, yeah. So based on this, and based on knowing the floor area in each level, you can actually assess very clearly that at a given point of time, how many maximum people you can have inside the mall. Okay. Now, how to monitor this? It's very easy. At every entry exit, if you have counters that basically in real time count both entry as well as exit, you will get a net picture. At any given point of time, you will get a net picture. The net, these many people are inside the mall. Okay, and based on your pre-assessment of the capacity, you know the total value for the whole space as such, and for each floor. Okay. So with this real-time monitoring, you can very well control the number of people. If the number of people crosses or reaches close to that threshold, you should simply stop entry of people inside the mall. Simple. That's the best way. Divert the traffic, or say that right now there is no space available, or whatever it be. Yeah. That way you will be able to do crowd management also, and ensure that at no point of time you create a situation of risk or safety or standard. But these things can happen. We recently, I remember, in one of the college fest in Kerala, during one of the performances, a lot more people try to enter. The students and faculty members who were trying to enter that space where the show was happening, and they didn't estimate how many people can come, and it actually resulted in stampede. I think it was in Kochi or somewhere. Just a few months back. Yeah. So these things can be very well avoided. It can happen in a mall also, especially on occasions like Christmas or other festivals where you're expecting a lot of crowd.
But then how do you look at there's a huge amount of focus on accommodating as many cars as possible. How much can they actually build? They already, even if you assume 10,000, it's going to be, let's say it spikes to 15. Where does it go?
Correct. So, that's where these, traditional thumb rules of, these many parking spaces for this much floor area doesn't work. Because you can't see these parking provisions in isolation without thinking about what is the network level impact of that on the traffic and on the road infrastructure, on the level of service that roads are offering, the congestion level, and so on. So you also need to keep that in mind. You can't endlessly, build a lot of road infrastructure to just keep feeding this space. So that's where, with a realistic traffic assessment, you can then run scenario and see that if through certain specific interventions we can, divert these many percentage of people to using say metro or some other mode, or say run some shuttle service or feeder bus service from that property to the nearest metro station or something, you can then reduce the. I mean, it's beneficial for the developer also. Yeah, then they will have lesser requirement of park, and they can utilize space more effectively for their commercial benefits also,
and leave with a good reputation as well. But one last question: this BBMP knows how to give instructions on setback and these ratios and all that. Traffic police, they don't. They know how to tell you what it's supposed to look like and how they are able to manage it. It's mainly an enforcement thing. There is no planning expertise. You're doing a lot of trip impact assessments and traffic impact assessments. Who do you think should, in the end up coordinating these kind of things? Because we've talked about
BMLT.
the answer. I was just going to say that.
Yeah, BMLT is the answer, and BMLT should enforce the scientific, methodology and inserting this as a mandatory process for any property development to be approved
of a certain size, of beyond a certain size.
Yeah. Of course, you can, through through a good research, you can establish that below this much size or scale, you don't really need to go into that, and only beyond that we can do that. So you can, but anything beyond that, you should make this as a mandatory exercise, that before you even approve this development, you have to do these things.
Just add that traffic impact assessment is still not mandatory, even after facing so many issues again and again across malls. Across malls, every mall, it just goes from one mall to the other.
And it's not just, I would say any large scale development that you're allowing, say a big IT park. Okay. Manyata also has seen it, now they build this flyover, etc., as a relief for themselves. But then, of course, they shift the problem somewhere else. But any such large development, in fact, for that matter, IISc in their campus is building a huge, hospital and medical research facility of 800 bed or something. We are still not sure how effectively the traffic impact assessment has been done and how this would impact the traffic inside the campus as well as all the adjoining road network across. And if it is not accounted for, you must see maybe in a different manner a similar kind of situation like Phoenix Mall of Asia, because here it's also about ambulances in and out. 800 bed hospital is a big one. Even our Ramya hospital is not that big. Yeah. So you're also talking about emergency vehicles in and out, and how do you handle that traffic onto your network? And you can't say that ambulances have to be reduced and patients can come on public transport. No, but then yes, there are other affiliated trips. Yeah, employees of doctors, of nurses, of visitors, of relatives who are coming and so on. You need to manage that.
Yeah, knowing the institute well and its checkpoint and its security checking process, it's going to cause quite a backup onto the streets around.
As campus community, we are also worried about the traffic impact, and we have been impressing upon the institute administration to look at those issues more proactively and use the in-house expertise that is there in the IISc. Hopefully, we'll succeed, but it's a larger, I would say, a issue.
Yes.
Which the authorities are not handling it correctly.
And I think the fact that we have the environmental impact assessment that is mandatorily supposed to upload, but not a traffic impact assessment, knowing fully well that every mall, every campus, every tech park, every building that is being built going forward is going to have this. I am surprised that it is not even mandatory.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time. So, where are we left with now? We know now that the traffic impact assessment is not mandatory. What a shocking thing. Let's understand. If you're building large buildings and it is not even mandatory to make an impact assessment and get everybody on the same page, the traffic police and everyone, before you start building a building, right? You also heard that they do it, but the consultant, because it's not mandatory, can write whatever it is. and be done with it. I'm not questioning that they may not do a good job, but if they don't, how do we know? What is BMLTA doing here? Where is BMLTA? Now let's understand what is their job, right? There are two aspects to this. One is the parking itself is a small part of traffic. Traffic is about people going in and out. You heard about managing the crowds, right? And they hop onto vehicles at the end of it. Vehicles of different types. It could be a bus, it could be a metro, it could be a train, it could be an auto rickshaw, it could be a car, it could be a two-wheeler, it could be a bicycle. Or they may just walk home if they were living nearby, right? So people use vehicles. Now, how do you split them efficiently? That's a part of the traffic impact assessment. Can you move more people more efficiently by using public transport? Take Europe, for example. Europe doesn't do parking minimums. It doesn't say you need 2 cars per 100 meter square. It doesn't say that. It says maximums. That is more common. As a condition of planning permission for a new development, the development must be designed so that the minimum percentage of visitors arrive by public transport. So they actually give you at least 10%, 20% should arrive by public transport. The number of parking spaces in the development is limited to a number less than the expected number of visitors. So which by default seems to be happening here. They actually give you parking maximums. They don't tell you cater for everybody who comes in a car or a two-wheeler. Try to move people to more efficient modes. I have seen this. How do they do that? I was talking to somebody in Copenhagen or someplace in Europe a long time ago, and they were telling me approvals for buildings are not given if you cannot prove that you have access to public transportation within 200 to 300 meters of where you are building. What kind of public transport? As many as possible. If you have a metro, you get more points. If you have a train, like a suburban train, you get more points. So the larger the carrying capacity, you get more points. If you have a bus, you get points. If you encourage cycling and walking and other things, you get more points. So the more you encourage to efficient people to come in more efficient modes, you get those points, and they count towards maybe to getting your approval faster, right? These are the things that are done. Let's take London, for example. That's a use case that I have spoken to people. Transport for London is an entity that is the equivalent of our Bengaluru Metropolitan Land Transport Authority. This is a planning body, right? PMLT is unique in Bengaluru. So it's supposed to bring the traffic police, the BBMP, and all these people and say, look, this is this new property coming in. This is how the spatial development plan is laid out by the PDA. So there's a master plan. There is this development plan. Then you have enforcement. You have the building approvals. How do you bring this all together? The TFL, the Transport for London, has spatial planning teams which take care of negotiations based on the master plan and zoning regulations for the city. For each zone, they have a different spatial planning team with a coordinator. And they actually have categories of traffic impact assessment saying if this is your property and this is how it looks, this is how you do the assessment and this is what it is. So they have category wise, right? And these teams actually sit down and not just negotiate the parking. They actually sit with the builder and say, now here's your building, here's what you're putting out. You not only take care of inside your compound, you also have to do these things. Like if you go to Lulu Mall, they have built an underpass which is going in and coming out. That's an example of how they step out and do something. If you go to Manita Tech Park, they put a flyover from there, this thing onto the public road to ease out the junctions, right? So every building, different levels. It could be a smaller interchange, it could be an extra signal, it could be reorienting the junctions. There is no investment by the builder or even allocation by the builder to the public space in front. There is no formal process of engaging in junction improvements and traffic management plans on the streets outside your externalities. There is no collaborative way of doing that. And London does that. And this is where entities like BMLTA, which is stillborn, by the way, the bill was passed in the previous government and this government is sitting on it. The rules have not been notified. It is stillborn. So if you want to fix these things, first is get an entity which will do all these things and then sit on their head and say, make the traffic impactment assessment mandatory. Now, environmental impact assessment is mandatory because you want to save the environment. You want to get how much of waste you're not going to throw out, how much of water you're going to consume. Why isn't it being asked how much of traffic are you going to spew onto the roads? Why aren't we having a negotiation on that? Why aren't we sitting across the table? Who is going to make them sit across the table? You need a planning body which is sitting down and saying, we need all of these things done. Bring the BBMP, bring the traffic police, bring the water, bring all these people together and have that kickoff meeting where the planning applications will have a negotiation bit in it, which talks about, based on the traffic impact assessment, which is mandatory, how are you going to contribute to the space in front of your property? How much are you willing to put up as a percentage of your, depending on the intervention, of course. If it's a large campus and you needed to build a whole flyover to join the other flyover, that's what it is. It's a smaller property and it has, if you just have to tackle the service road and put a grade separator for the rest of the things, that's what it is. If you don't have this guideline, the properties won't plan allocations for it when they're budgeting. You can't suddenly come and say put a flyover. They have to go and find the monies. They will if you ask them to, but you should have it very clear. The authorities need to be very clear in understanding. When a planning application is given, don't just check off these boxes. Have a kickoff meeting with the planning authorities. Do you have the ability to sit with them and understand and tweak it? So what are the solutions now? One of which is make traffic impact assessment mandatory and sit down, have planning assessments, get the BMLTA working, get all of them in one place. And there are smaller things. If you want to understand parking itself, right? Let's talk about the parking itself that everybody thinks should be free. I have seen people come on Twitter and say, oh, how can they charge 20 rupees? They're charging 200 rupees for pedestrians. So that is so stupid. You should be getting more people to walk in. It's probably because the pedestrians were not actually walking from their home. They had actually parked on the street and causing the problem and then walking inside, and they were trying to discourage that. Because street parking is free. In the whole city, street parking is free. So why would you pay for parking inside when parking on the road is free for everyone? DPMP has approved a parking policy by DULT, Directorate of Urban Land Transport. Your fees to charge on the street must be more per hour than the charge inside. So you're expected to go inside if you came in a vehicle. And both of them should be expensive, so you take the metro, right? We don't have mass transport solutions. We don't provision that. I'm sure if there are 10,000 people coming into that as per the police, that's a huge enough volume for buses. Why wouldn't we run buses all the way to Hebal so, people can take that, or run shuttle services, taking you off to some other place? Parking management plan, charge for parking, ban parking outside. Literally ban parking right outside. Why would you need that? If you have that, everybody's going to park there. Or if you really do make allocations and not random parking, if you do make allocations, charge more for it outside so that people actually go inside. Give incentives to come on a bicycle and walk. Oh, people are asking us to go around to get inside. You are on a motorbike, go around. You're in a car, go around. Go for 3 more kilometers. Go around. It doesn't matter. You should be willing to go around and not have access to it right on the service road. I have to take a left and I should be inside. Movie seat also should come next to my door so I can just sit on it and then it should take me up. No, go around, walk around a little bit. And that's how we have built cities. One road, everything pile onto the road. There aren't catchment roads. Our classification has gone for a toss. There are collector streets which collect the traffic and then feed into the arterial so that it can move smoothly. And you exit out of the arterial into collector street and go on to local streets, or from collector streets get inside. So you have to build that network. You don't do any kind of planning. Throw asphalt on any small piece of land you see, end to end. No space for walking, cycling, no space for public transport, nothing. Just end to end. I want free parking for 10,000 cars. Just don't go to malls anymore. Just wait it out. Thank you.